Regards to the ambassadors, diplomatic body, chiefs of accredited missions in Colombia and in other countries, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mrs. Rosa Yolanda Villavicencio Mapi, who was also a migrant in Spain and who became a socialist leader in Madrid. General Secretary of the Department of International Affairs and Cooperation of South Africa, same number. Minister of State of Palestine, Mr. Riyad Mansour, Riyad. Executive Secretary of the Hague Group, Barsha Andikota, Special Rapporteur of the United Nations on the situation of human rights in the Palestine territories occupied from 1967. I should say from 1948. Mrs. Francesca Albanese, officers of the national government, media, national and international media in general, to all the people here in this room. We were born on April 19th. On April 19th, Colombian people cried for freedom. On April 19th, I believe, I hope I'm not wrong with my memory, Palestine rebellion. Precisely when the occupation started. On April 19th, we stood up in rebellion. And I think that there are other April 19th along the history. And these perhaps gather us together as people that in different parts of the world have risen up in rebellion because we want to be democrats and free. And in the world, there is more and more slavery. As time goes by, those that rose the flag of democracy has become slavists. New slaveries, as Pope Bergoglio, my friend, said. Francis, who was also a rebel. And it was because he felt what was happening spiritually in the whole of humanity. We're going to barbaric times, but we can also move to freedom. All the dialectical philosophers, Chinese Lao Tzu, I just heard the same philosophy on the Guambian people from Cauca when they named Barbara as a member of the Colombian Academy of the Language. That is not a small feat. And I read her text just presented, expressing in a flawless Spanish the philosophy of the Nisak people and the ancestral indigenous people as well. And this philosophy is just dialectical, built without knowing Hegel, without knowing Lao Tzu, without even knowing Heraclitus, even older. Philosophy that has been with me to make calls. Everything moves on the principle of contradiction. Therefore, a positive has its negative. Light, an area filled with light, can become dark. Everything can turn into an opposite. Otherwise, the story wouldn't move. Nor the universe, because the principle is universal, it seems. In the universe that we see that comes from the past, everything, including the moon, because light travels in space, as Einstein said, we see light and darkness. And we are always in charge of seeing beyond that part of the darkness becomes light. We can detect it. It's a light that was launched many years ago. thousands of light years ago, but sometimes light disappear because worlds died as well. Enormous worlds. We know that, and we don't know if they come back to be light. Some physicals said that it is the case, but here we are in an infinitesimal point of the universe. And so it seems the only one with life, or at least smart life, or intelligent life. How many light years around us we can see, and there is no life? It seems so. And it seems that we cannot talk but only the idea of Diogenes, that everything else is belief. And the lantern of Diogenes doesn't show life in the universe. We are alone, unique. And it seems that in the universe there is an intelligence that is energy. Because even darkness has energy. Energy all from the space and others, but there is one special, the one that inhabits this planet on mammals or on a species world, and among them human beings. The only ones with the immense responsibility in all the universe of the intelligence of thinking. We are thinking animals, and that thinking is developed more and more in its main essence, which is the brain. Every time that a baby is born, the jewel of the universe is born, their brain and their heart, in a package that we call human being. And if the human being and the human brain that was acting alone, in order to be able to survive in the planet with the cold that we have, there is an experience that was just experienced here in Bogota. To be able to live, they had to help each other. And helping each other is the secret that allows us to thrive and sometimes, for worse, dominate the planet, the only place where life thrives. It seems so. So helping each other, it's our secret. But this aid has two big ways. It's an aid that is born from the heart, from the feeling, to be more accurate, because we are sensitive and the mammals help each other as some others animals do. The ones that survive help each other. The bees that go in a hive, they feed by helping each other, sucking the honey and finding it. Sometimes they die for it. And this attraction of the honey, of the bee with the honey, we can call it survival instinct. But in mammals, it's called love. What we feel to help each other is love. And without this, we cannot live. The neoliberal in the last stage of the great capital are being destroyed, and the feeling of barbaric stages are just an expression of a capitalism that is capitalism only in paper. As we were talking when I had a feud with Macron, that the GDP measured in dollars and euros, GDP that not everything is production, has 110 trillion per year, and the public debt has 230 trillion per year. It's going to collapse. I don't know when, but it's going to collapse. It's collapsing already. Capitalism is not more than a world of paper, but it has the virtue, or, or the dark virtue, to take us to the barbaric times in its own collapse. Barbaric times that are really dreadful, but there are two. The one of the climate change and artificial intelligence, as Hopkins says. Not because having an AI that is not necessarily live, but what are we producing in the universe, but that must be under control of the live intelligence, and not from a country, not from a mega rich capitalist and crazy guy, but it has to be under the reins of humanity, live intelligence of humanity. Otherwise, humanity is going to end. Maybe the world can be very productive, but then again, we're going to unravel. And Gaza is just an experiment of mega rich trying to prove to all the people of the world how do we respond to a rebellion of humanity. They want to bomb us all. The ones that are in the south, but we're going to end up as in Guernica, bombing themselves with foreign weapons. And this perspective of slaughtering kills the multilateralism that we should find the cities, kills the idea of a global world, an international world. I have requested a meeting from SELAC with the government of the United States, and they haven't given not even a single answer, because they don't want to get in touch with Latin America and the Caribbean, because they know that working with each one separately, they are stronger. So they are not dialogue. They didn't talk. They threat, as it happens to us often. Some are scared of threats. Some have become so accustomed to these that we are not scared anymore. And the history has been like that in our people. Histories of rebellions and barbaric times. And the possibility of these is felt here, but also dialectically speaking, the possibility of having a different humanity. The link together, and we survived, because the other way of helping besides the heart is thinking. And Newton's parable and Robinson's Crusoe parable would be lie. Will be only illusions that we feel. We live amongst ghosts because capitalism is a ghost. And sometimes we believe the idea of this ghost. Just ideas. Newton couldn't create his gravity theory without algebra, without the Arabs, without the Romans, without the Greeks, without the Egyptians, without other people that in America, as we knew, had a more profound idea of mathematics. They were calculating the stars, the planets, more than even the same mathematicians. In Latin America, we have marvelous things that want to hinder the America, because the America was reduced to just a part of the American continent. In Americas, we had people for over 30,000 years, and they created art. In Brazil, 20,000 years until we have the data, and places close to Bogota, to the Amazon jungle, Chiribiquete, that I want to open to the world, and there is a fine documentary about that, something magical between the jungles and the colored birds, enormous murals as we haven't seen maybe in any other part of artists. By generations, they take their brands and their ideas, their hands as people that were there forever in the humanity, in their history. 20,000 years our ancestors bear, and maybe even more. And yes, they, with some laugh and mocking from pseudo-economists of the cachacos, as we call the ones that are not from the Caribbean, but that is also here close to this place. 6,000 years ago, there was a people that we didn't know where they were coming from, The genes are not in the places where we have survived. And all of them died. They didn't have any descendants. Maybe the women died for a reason. Maybe first, because in this land with so much water, that group disappeared. Maybe they didn't help each other. Maybe their loneliness killed them. A lack of water. Bogota, not now, but some weeks ago, Bogota was without a city with 9 million inhabitants because they burned the Amazon, and it turns out that the water that arrived here was from the Amazon jungle, and it went to great lengths, and the vegetation also turned the steam into liquid water, and we ran out of it. Climate crisis, the second fact that can finish the humanity, and we all know.
Okay.
A climate crisis that is rising. Let's look at the dialectic speech behind this. We are in the region with most extensive oil exploitation in the region, and we have our national oil company Ecopet to perpetrate fracking, and I have called for intervention of said company to preserve the natural beauty of Colombia. Here we are a reservoir of animals. Many animals migrate here, and that was discovered when we lost Panama and they built the Panama Canal. And my sincerest respect for Panama, but we used to be a united nation as well as we were with Venezuela. And if we follow along the ancient borders of the Grand Colombia that almost reach Nicaragua, it almost covered most of the Caribbean. Most of current nations wanted to our yellow, blue, and red flag. And Haiti wanted to rebel. And with all due respect to my Haitian friends, the first free territory of Latin America was founded by Bencos Jongo, and there is not a single monument to him. There is a monument to Belarcázar Conquistador in Cali, but he was perpetrated genocide. So this is all about the dialectics on how the free people made statues and monuments for those esclavists, slaverists. We should honor those who fought for freedom, and our first liberator that we had record of are those of those indigenous people. And here we celebrate on the 1st of this month the freedom of Santa Marta at the hands of the indigenous peoples over 500 years ago, when the first vessel reached that coast and they founded the first Spanish city in the whole of Latin America, close to Santa Marta. That also has to do with how histories are being told. So there was a slave revolution and they fled. And they tried to pursue a different way of life, and they founded the village of San Basilio de Palenque. And this government recognized it a legitimate town because the elites of this hate that we support those who fought freedom. So we have to honor this heritage. Sometimes I say to North Americans, why bring the Statue of Liberty all the way to New York and we can install it in front of Cartagena? Resisted a siege for over a year, fighting for their freedom, being one of the cities most heavily affected by slavery, along with Havana and Veracruz, Mexico. And today, Havana, Veracruz, Mexico, and Cartagena are being governed by the people that believe in democracy, that believe this idea that Diogenes lantern should shine bright. So I just wanted to read history to come back to the present, because history combines together. So out of Haiti, the first revolution under the flag of equality, fraternity, and solidarity. Here, my friend knows how to pronounce this in French better than I would. What says, but those who were fighting for that cause were also oppressive states. Back then, Washington was an oppressive state. And now, going back to our liberator in the same palace. And I can those who fought for the freedom of this country. We have the biggest contradiction. You cannot cry for freedom if you're oppressing others yourself. Here, allow me to that this palace used to be the home of Republican presidents of Colombia. Many oligarchs, like traders. 1851, once Bolivar and Santander passed away. They used to live here until they abandoned home. A home such as this, a home one that I didn't have it, that wanted to imitate France, but homes sometimes don't have a soul. So here in this very palace, we have seen a very simple room that used to be the room of the first president of the Republic of Colombia that we had. Our liberator, Simon Bolivar. He's not a liberator, he is an emancipator. He is the son of, but he knew how to dance with Afro-Colombians because apparently he knew how. Apparently, he as many Colombians who have African ancestry and that carry dance and rhythm in their blood. So he was able to fuse two cultures. And there are other monuments such as Alhambra that fuse Arabic and Spanish culture. Back then, you could see the history that Arab women would throw rose petals from me, and these rose petals would fall into water fountains in the gardens. So out of those Arabs that were defeated militarily and fused their blood with the inhabitants of Spain, then we got sailors from Spain visit Caribbean coast. They were the first to Santa Marta and to Cartagena. And that's why Colombians also have Arab heritage. And we can say that we have all different types of blood in our veins. Arab blood can also come from sub-Saharan origins. This is ancestral blood that is over 3,000 years old. And sometimes we've been told that there are movement fictions in the Americas, that there are certain regions in Latin America that are inaccessible by Latin America. So some Mexicans can even run Alcatraz state because they're not allowed to access their own territory. I even had a tense situation with President Trump, in which I returned a plane with so-called deported immigrants. They were in chains, and I was outraged by this because I was thinking that slavery had ended. Didn't Bolivar say that we needed to free? Didn't Bolivar tell the founding father of the United States that we need to be free? Even though they were slave leaders, they didn't raise the flag of freedom before the French people. So that is a huge contradiction. We have liberators who turn slave traders. And when we talk about our Colombian flag, half of it reflects the Haitian flag. That was by Black people who were also slave traders. So we know that the Colombian flag comes from the Haitian flag, as well as the Venezuelan flag, the Ecuadorian flag. They are yellow, blue, and red. I think that history is what we've been told. That's why our flag reflects Haitian history. The flag brought over by Haitian generals. They were the first ones to design this flag. And after this flag became a sign of freedom. And here, it came triumphant, but it was also betrayed right here in the same home when our liberator Santander was victim of attempt. History says that Santander flew out of a window and he fled down that was around this property. He used to be in love with a Spanish princess who died here because she wasn't able to tolerate the climate here and climate conditions such as mosquitoes. So I can say that love saved him back then. And then he decided to free himself. You're more vulnerable, and he died alone. When you flee alone, you know that sometimes you're gonna have strength. So when we work alone, we are more vulnerable to death. So only when we join forces, we can be strong. So here we have some people from the Caribbean. The Caribbean is not a land of pirates. It's the land of freers, of rebels, which is slave traders. And the Caribbean needs to remain free. Slaves, when they were brought from Africa, they will jump out of the vessels, swim to the shore. They founded their own nations along with some indigenous people called Garnes or Raíz population, having most of the islands of the Caribbean. And they will refuse to be enslaved. They were never slaves. They have a perception of life. We are also Caribbeans, and we also island in the Caribbean is called San Andres, founded by free peoples. And because they were free, they joined to Colombia because they saw the land of freedom here in Colombia. Someone promised full freedom of slaves in America, and they didn't fulfill their promise. we are victims of new slavery. Migrants are sometimes living under terrible conditions. We've been gaining terrain in the Organization of American States, Laura Hugh is here present. She is a Colombian, and she's an expression of that sense. We were not defeated, but now the Inter-American human rights system that was our torch, I was elected president thanks to them, fell under different administration. And it was due to a rupture of progressive government in the continent that we are still the majority, that we were able, even though we fight, we lost the efficiency or the spirit of the Inter-American human rights system. Priorities changed, and we cannot lose the idea of freedom embodied by all of these Caribbean nations. We need to be united, and we still have the memory of Grand Colombia, the great nation that we need to rebuild. If the Latin American region reunites, it's because the Grand Colombia came together to work together. And if the Grand Colombia is divided, Latin America will never be able to integrate because they are opposing forces, and there are certain dialectics that are being applied. So yes, we need to help Haiti as they back then. And what we were told by Mr. Che Guevara, one of the most universal Argentinian citizens, where you see injustice, we have to fight against it. It doesn't matter where in the world. That was something attempted by Bolivar. Anywhere in the world there is injustice, we need to fight it because we stop being human beings. And the message by Che Guevara is still present by ourselves. Only inhuman people will label Che Guevara as a murderer. Justice and the right to rebel is necessary when in the face of tyranny. And nowadays we're being governed by tyranny. Those who used to be the Democrats become slave traders. So the paradox of Haiti, whose Napoleon army was defeated in Haiti, our battles against the Spaniards cannot be compared to the rebellion of former slaves in Haiti against the Napoleonic state. And that's why Macron was angry that a president from the South, came to teach him that you can be sitting in Paris and turn your face to injustice. I love France, of course. I'm very fond of them because those of us on the left wing of Colombia believe us to be French or be heavily French influenced, and we learned French. And most of the most important revolutions started in France. They're no longer in fashion, but I hope that we have a revolution. But now the focus is here in Latin America, and we are not French. But of course, we have the longest line of descendants of the Roman Empire. But here, we also have vengeance and love, as Bolivar lived in this very same house. And this is a contradiction faced by the Italians as well. We are also facing that contradiction. But yes, let me not delve into that. But I want to say that we're the heritage of the Roman Empire, but we're also descendants from ancient cultures, ancient Latin American cultures. Although we shouldn't be called Latin America because we were not of Latin origin. We represent the world's diversity. Anyone who lives in Bogota or in any region can find a man or a woman who reflects ethnicities from all over the world. And that's who we are as a people. So we can interact, we can belong to mankind. And that's why we try to reach agreements. We try to avoid war and conflicts unless we are forced to it, as we were to do it with North Korea. Since 1948 to this date, 700,000 Colombians have been murdered due to political reasons and due to greed. And sometimes for a passion or love. Sometimes we died of love by ourselves. And that was reflected in the novel of our Nobel Prize, 100 Years of Solitude, that reflects 100 years of conflict of people that has been affected by civil war. And the only way in which we can attain peace and beauty is to stop being isolated as peoples. We have isolated because we see 700,000 assaulted in our history. It's almost 10 times the number of victims of Gaza. Our children have also perished. We've also been victims of bombardings over our peasant people. So, one president who was a descendant of slave traders, that in order to extinguish communists and to avoid having a second Cuban revolution, they needed to bombard farmers' associations. And we replicated the scenario that Guernica of Spain, Guernica. And then those affected people fled to the mountains and they wanted to overthrow the oligarchical state. And they almost win the revolution, but due to the vices of the fighters, they were not able to achieve their goals. We also had our Nobel Peace Prize, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, to Colombia, try to defend freedom, try to defend books. So those who support killings, to support death as descendants of Latin Americans, end up perpetrating horrible crimes. So here we're hoping to end our solitude, our isolation, and that's why we want to come together with the whole of Latin America, with the whole of humanity, and have a dialogue with President Trump, because he has refused to talk to us. But of course, we have to talk to the Americans because they will be here for thousands of years to come, and we will be here for thousands of years to come. So we have to understand each other by using the way of dialogue, as opposed to using the language of bombs. South America has a huge potential for renewable agencies, so they can decarbonize the whole of the energy, full of the fossil energy matrix of the United States. And this is something that we're not talking about, and that will solve to a great extent the issue of the climate crisis, and that will protect life. But we're not having the conversation. The United States, they do not believe in climate change, and we see how they've been affected by floodings in Texas. And even in the capital of capitalism, where at the downtown area in Brooklyn and Down Street, you can smell marijuana being smoked. When they kill 1 million of Latin Americans in the war against drug because they were exporting cannabis. So we bear the death and they enjoy the pleasure. So that is a huge paradox. And they want to continue killing us, exterminating us, and we are defending life and we need to speak up. And now I move forward to Gaza and then I will end my speech. But of course, history is infinite, it never ends. Okay, so we have experienced Gaza in our blood. We have also been invaded. Some Colombians might be outraged when the peoples who have been suppressed by tyrants rebel. We can criticize Hamas, but we cannot criticize the Palestinian people. They do have a right to rebellion because their land was occupied. Our Colombian lands have been occupied twice. Once by Spaniards a long time ago. Some of our islands were occupied by the British, by the French, and Panama was also occupied by North Americans. And they took away our territory. It is lucky that we didn't disappear. And an occupied nation deserves to rebel. Rebellion is not a political crime. It's only a political crime when it affects the tyrant. And now they name the rebels terrorists. Those who engage in rebellion are not criminals. I was almost once prevented from raising the flag from Bolivar, which was green and black, and Bolivar was carrying this flag in his fight against Spain. And General Murillo ended up having a conversation with Simon Bolivar. But they continue the war, but they brought a human perspective to the war, and that's why we still have Spaniards living amongst us, because they also have a right to life. So back then, Bolivar understood the rights and the dignity of his opponents, the Spanish opponents who didn't want to return to Spain. But what this flag represented was freedom or death. And I don't know where he came with this idea of this flag, because Bolivar ride his horse through all over this country, and in the back then Spain wanted to be republican such as Colombia, and Bolivar lifted these flags that were red and black or green and black, and that is what represent freedom or death. And because we don't want to talk about that, we'll say freedom or freedom. So that flag loses its black color and it turns in red. So here we want to stand for freedom and the protection of life. Europe went to a very difficult time after defeating Hitler, and now they are electing Hitler's sons and daughters, and they are repeating what was back then the speech of Hitler. We are superior if we are white, and we reject everyone who has a different skin color than ours. When that is what Hitler was doing back then, how would it be possible that partisan peoples of Italia would adopt similar speeches? They have all types of people, Christian, communists, and those who survived the Republican Spain. And those who first marched in a liberated France were anarchists. An anarchist movement who was defeated in the past, and then that they were enjoying freedom against the enemies of freedom.
Where is Europe now? So we have a series of tasks and questions that we have to fulfill. The largest mass grave is not in Latin America, but in the Mediterranean, precisely where democracy was created, or at least the word as such, in Athens, filled with corpses of migrants trying to reach Europe. That why they have migration? Because they made the world poorer with their colonies. They are the ones that empower the others, so they are the slaughters of the humanity. And the way out to leave these and to get the flags again, to bear the flags again, say that the progress must reach the south. Africa can also decarbonify the energy matrix of Europe. And Chinese are doing an immense effort as well. I have seen that from our side, but I decided to put Colombia in the Silk Route because we weren't threatened or insulted there. Hope it goes well. And now we are part of the universe. We're part of the world. Now we are not so lonely. Now we can leave the violence. The Mediterranean, where we have the Palestine, because Mediterranean is plural, where Jesus was born, who was a Palestine. The place where he was born is under threat, and it's Palestine. And we don't understand that. That message from Jesus is that there are no chosen people in Palestine, not Jewish people. It was a religion, not an ethnicity, because they were Palestine as well. They were born in Palestine. Not the Christian white from the United States. They are not the chosen people. From the voice of Jesus when he took the sellers from the temple, the peddlers from the temple, he decided that the chosen people of God is humanity, is the only ones with a thinking brain, thinking of what we have thought about the universe. That's why we are the chosen people. We all are the chosen people. Doesn't kill with each other. The day that every human being is free in the planet, there will be no wars. We think on the stars, ad astra, as the Romans said. We said ad astra too. And humanity moves around the universe bringing life. And the inert world is going to become something vital, thinking with a free brain, helping each other. And it will be our destiny if we defeat today's barbaric, heinous situation. And this is done only if Palestine is free. We met with the Palestinian guerrilla from the Palestinian Liberation Front, the movement April 19th, the Bolivarian movement, and we trained together and we learned things together. And it was in the desert of Batraba in Libya where Gaddafi was alive. And the Swapo from Namibia, who is here, was there. And they were part of the National African Council. And they were from the Polisario front that spoke Spanish, Arab, because it's another people that were conquered, and Greeks. So a series of guys, because none of them were old, they gathered together from Latin American, Panamanian, and from Africa and the Middle East to train us for a war. Finally, we ended up making peace, dialectically speaking. Mandela, Arafat, M19 in Colombia, and almost all the Latin American guerrillas. We gathered together to prepare for a war, and we ended up creating a peace for the world. And that's where Palestine were with us. Nobody has wrote that book. I have asked people from the M19, the still surviving ones, to write it because part of this history, because tells different things, that progressive men and women are universal. It's not something from a small place. They got together with the world. They crossed the ideas of fight against tyranny. Two of my friends died there. Two of the dearest, Hernan Laura, who was completely tore apart, and he was a poet. And I tried to recover his poetry and his songs. I tried to have someone on the internet to put it in new technologies. I'm Francisco Vargas. And many died, but there are some still alive. Why don't we write a book that is a book of world solidarity from rebellion? And a member of the M19 now is a president, and now we are sons and officers of Bolivar. Officers of Bolivar, one step into the front. Vanquish or die. Now it's vanquish only, as Bolivar said eventually. We have to vanquish, we have to win. So we have to make calls, tough ones, facing dark times. I was betrayed in this palace. Again, history is repeated again, because I said that not a single ton was going to move to kill Palestine. My government, white officers coming from Labists, took making the idea of this innocuous. It wasn't Drummond. They took advantage of this, but the one that did this were paid by the Colombian people and in other ministries. So very Santander, they set a trap, the same that when Santander well Bolivar in the second floor of this home. The tradition that we have in each other, solitude maybe started that day when Santander was going to kill Bolivar, and it was saved by a woman, by Manuelita, who was Ecuadorian, and from leper, they said, and we are not revindicating Manuelita's science, revindicating Policarpa Salabarrieta, who was the first guerrilla lady of Colombia, on top of some indigenous that even infatuated some Spaniards, because all the ways of fight, of struggle are possible. So saved us, and I hope that they can save us again, because we're about to being extinguished again. The front line in the fight for life, I hope. They ride a horse like Manuelita, that said that she was the Turkey loved ones. They did the lives, and Manuelita and some others, as generals, is the time woman, because the woman is the one that takes life for life. We have to do that.
We listen to some statements from the Colombian president